Ancient Earth History Part 7, Atlantis and Mu. Chapter 2, by Robert Dawson, June 11th, 2024.
It must have been quite a sight. Absolute and simple amazement. The Earth had renewed itself after a worldwide cataclysmic war from which their ancestors had escaped into space. For 700 years, they avoided Earth altogether. Now they had arrived to the beautiful blue planet to make a fresh start, perhaps wiser and more determined not to repeat the mistakes of their forefathers. The war and turmoil which devastated the Earth and forcing their ancestors to flee was caused by an Yishvish, someone who should have been wiser. The name of the man-god was Jesus.
The New Arrivals 70th Contact, Thursday, the 6th of January, 1977, 001 hours.
For about 10,000 years, harmony and peace reigned. But then, again, an Jeshwish called Jassus came out, who murdered Pelagon's successor and seized power over all the, by then, united different folks and races. 20 years later, however, the folk rose up against Jassus, and a terrible and worldwide war broke out again over the earth by those who had traveled farther. Many hundreds of thousands fled with large and small ships into free space, set down and settled in another space-time structure in Beta Centaurus, which you know in your space-time structure as the Barnard Star. A few million humans remained on the Earth, where everything that had been built by the extraterrestrial humans had been completely destroyed and totally eliminated. Those left behind, deprived of all technical and other cultural possibilities by the complete total destruction, gradually fell into a wicked lethargy, atrophied and became wild beings in a nasty barbarism. For 700 years, the Earth was simply avoided before the descendants of the fugitives set out to populate the beautiful blue world again. This was 133,000 Earth years ago, according to your current chronology. The returnees were led by an Jeshwish with the name Atlant, married to an Jeshrish named Caryatide. In this latest episode, under the leadership of Atlant, the continent of Atlantis, which had been headed for again and again, and used for millennia, was expanded and made habitable, while under the command of his wife Caryatide, Lesser Atlantis came into existence, as at the same time her cousin Maras built the gigantic city of Mu, which, like Atlantis, also found its origin in very early times.
Simyase informs us in this contact report that there had been a previous settlement at the location now called Atlantis, and Atlant expanded and developed it further. In Plato's account as it appears in Critias, this previous development is attributed to the god Poseidon, who initially terraformed the city.
In ancient Greek art, Poseidon pursuing a woman. Poseidon with a maiden near a spring where she fills a vase with water. Poseidon gives a woman a ride in his chariot. Greek art depicted his chariot as being pulled by a hippocampus, or by horses that could ride on the sea.
After falling in love with a young earth maiden named Cleito, Poseidon broke open the ground and enclosed the hill in which she dwelt all around with alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water, which he turned as with a lathe out of the center of the island, equidistant every way, so that no man could get to the island. He himself, as he was a god, found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the center island, bringing 2 streams of water under the earth which he caused to ascend as springs, one of warm water and the other of cold, and making every variety of food to spring up abundantly in the earth. Plato and Critias.
In ancient Greek myths, there are several stories of how Poseidon, with a strike of his trident, would create springs to flow out from the earth. In Athens, for instance, where Poseidon was considered an inland god, he created the salt spring on the Acropolis known as the Sea of Erechtheus by striking the ground with his trident. Other springs in other regions that are alleged to have been created by Poseidon have similar names in Boeotia and Peloponnese. So Poseidon seems to fit the description of an ancient civil engineer with a special tool set. He could also use his trident to cause the earth to vibrate. In fact, a cult title and alternate name for Poseidon was Enesidion, which meant earthshaker. Another story of his engineering accomplishments is how Zeus once sent Poseidon to serve King Laomedon of Troy, who subsequently had him build huge walls around the city. Most logically, Poseidon was not literally Atlan's father, but the term used figuratively as a forefather who created the initial concentric water and landmass design. And Plato's narrative of Poseidon's courtship of Cleito is a familiar theme of the sons and daughters of the heavens being smitten by the wild but beautiful earth folks found in several places in the contact notes as well as in the book O.M.
OM, Canon 31.
And it happened in those days, after the people of earth had multiplied, that the sons and daughters of the heavens came to earth, who were the travelers from afar from the depths of the universe. Mankind in those days were still wild and unruly, yet they possessed beauty to a great extent, the women as also the men. And the sons and daughters of the heavens saw the beauty of mankind of earth. Therefore they lusted for them, and they counseled among themselves, and said, Well then, we will select husbands and wives for us from among mankind of this world, and with them procreate descendants, and found our own nations.
After Plato describes the initial work of Atlantis performed by Poseidon, he goes on to describe that it was Atlas. Atlas is the Hellenic name for Atlans, with the help of his brothers. That built up the city and made it the marvel that it became. Building bridges, a central canal connecting to the sea, and a temple at the center surrounded by an enclosure of gold. The name differences of Plato's account are explained by him this way in Critias. Plato states that he still had in his possession the original account of Atlantis as it was transmitted from the Egyptians to Solon, who recorded it in writing and later passed it to his brother, Dropides.
A computer-generated image of Atlantis based on Plato's description, alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water.
This image may speak to some people in a subtle, unconscious sort of way.
The spirit-teaching symbol for humankind Menschheit, which appears in the book Symbols of the Spiritual Teaching, by Billy Meier. Excerpted from the foreword of the English translated edition.
So in this book, no signs will be found but only effective symbols, which had already been recorded graphically by Nocedemian and Henoch regarding the symbols of the spiritual teaching in primeval times. The actual origin of the symbols comes out of creational laws and recommendations, and indeed comes out of values which are recognizable in the nature. With that, however, not only the open countryside is meant but also the nature of the human being. The nature of his or her thoughts and feelings, his or her emotions, his or her psyche and his or her consciousness, as well as his or her virtues. Billy Simyase, Silver Star Center, February 19, 2004, 15:1.
Whether or not this design of alternating circular bands of 3 and 2 was done consciously with the spirit symbol in mind or entirely unconsciously is not known. But Earth was visited many times over and over by space travelers who would have had the knowledge, particularly those associated with the mission of Nocedemian and Henoch.
Batlin. Caryatide. Morris as the god Maruga.
It is not true in Greek mythology that Atlas was forced to hold the earth on his shoulders. Earlier, classical art shows him holding the celestial spheres, not the terrestrial globe. But later sculptors began taking artistic liberties by showing an earthen globe, such that over time it developed a stronger association. In European architecture, a support sculpted in the form of a man which may take the place of a column is still referred to as an atlant. In Contact Report 125, Semyase provides the meaning of the name. In the middle picture, 6-6 caryatides support the roof structure of a porch area at the ancient Erechtheion in Athens, Greece, where Poseidon allegedly created the Sea of Erechtheus. In Greek architecture, caryatides were the female equivalent to atlants as support structures. Muruga, also spelled Murugan, is known in India as the god of the native Tamil people and has been an important deity in the Indian subcontinent since ancient times. He is attributed to possess unparalleled bravery and intelligence and was regarded as a philosopher who taught the pursuit of an ethical life. Muruga was also known by the name Kartikeya, which means of the Critikas, an open star cluster which corresponds to the Pleiades in Western astronomy. Put another way, to millions living in India and Southeast Asia today, he is known as the Pleiadian. But do we know from the Plejaren contact notes that Murus himself actually came from the Pleiades-Plejaren star system? Yes, we do. We are told indirectly by Semyase later in the same report, CR70.
Coming from the north, Eris's son, Eris II, set out and fell upon those lands which today you call India, Pakistan and Persia, and so forth, whereby they struck the earliest forefathers of the Sumerians, who, peace-loving,
fled and set down far in the south,
folk of dark-colored skin, but by your terms, not Negroid, but like Europeans and of tall growth, risen from a race of former Syrian refugees, who had likewise settled on the earth 100 to 33,000 years ago, as did the refugees from the Plejaren system.
Previously, in line #111, Semyase stated that Murus arrived and settled on the earth 133,000 years ago. If we examine the ancient folklore and Hindu mythologies of the Southeast Asia region regarding Kartikeya, aka Murugan, from the perspective of the contact notes, a clarity that it is the space traveler Murus who is being described emerges. Sometimes Kartikeya, the Pleiadian, is depicted in art as having 6-6, heads representing the 6 stars in the Pleiades star cluster that are visible to the naked eye. It was said that the Critikas, that is to say, the 6-6 sisters of the star cluster, had taken good care of his upbringing to prepare him for a special mission on Earth. He was usually depicted with a peacock, oftentimes riding it. In India, peacocks are known to eat snakes, and the word used to call a peacock, which is Mayura, translates as the killer of snakes. In the picture on the far left, Kartikeya is shown giving 2 women a ride on his peacock. But Kartikeya's peacock was no ordinary peacock. Named Chitra, it was equipped with advanced technology including AI. It would materialize by his side out of nowhere teleportation? Report back with information, drone? Speak and carry on conversations, AI? Fly Kartikeya up into the heavens aircraft? And acted as a part-time bodyguard and confidant. Source Kartikeya by Anuja Chandramouli. Kartikeya carried a special spear called a vel, which when he planted in the earth, the mountains and rivers shook. This was similar in respect to the trident used by Poseidon. And when he hurled his vel in battle, it was said to move with the speed of light. In almost all the myth stories, Kartikeya was in constant conflict with the Asura. From Britannica, Asura in Hindu mythology, class of beings defined by their opposition to the Devas or Suras gods. The term Asura appears in the Vedas and refers to a human or divine leader. Its plural form gradually predominated and came to designate a class of beings opposed to the Vedic gods. Asura plural asuras, from Wiktionary, Hinduism, power-seeking deities involved in constant conflict with the more benevolent devas. The Asura bear a close resemblance to Aris with as many sons and their descendants as described in the contact notes.
70th contact, Thursday, the 6th of January, 1977, 001 hours.
Named after Eris II, the India of today was at that time called Aryan, which, however, split off from Hyperborea after a few centuries, after 210 years, to be exact, and joined with the inhabitants of Mu and Agartha, while from Hyperborea, Eris I constantly troubled Mu and Greater Atlantis by wicked war activities in order to become their ruler.
One particular oppressive Asura is said to have attacked the heavens and then attacked and attempted to destroy Goddess Earth by pulling her deep into the cosmic ocean. Gods appealed to Vishnu to save Earth Goddess and all life, who sent the avatar of a man-boar Varaha who rescued the Earth Goddess and restored order to the earth.
After 2,000 years, this hate-drenched people were so far along that it could venture an attack on the earth. Therefore it manned its ships and came newly to the earth, and indeed under the leadership of the Ishvish Aris, the barbarian. Eris was extremely bestial and barbarous in his disposition, and his power was feared. In a lightning action, they fell upon the earth, robbing, murdering, and taking possession of the land. During around half a millennia, or said very precisely, during 502 years, those war machinations continued, until Eris I, who in the meanwhile had become old and weak, succeeded in infiltrating wicked elements of his hater humans into the leading controlling ranks of Atlantis and Mu, who secretly stirred up violence and hate for so long, as also did their descendants over several centuries. Until, through boundless intrigues, Mu and Atlantis were able to be completely destroyed some centuries later, while the only few survivors were beaten into servitude.
In the Mahabharata, section Elagedev, a related story is told of how the earth became burdened by the oppressive Asuras, who began to spread fear and chaos among all creatures. In desperation, the earth sought protection from the divine Brahman, who then commanded the gods and heavenly beings to take birth on earth and confront the Asuras. The gods accepted the task and sought rebirth on earth in order to restore balance and protect the earth from the tyranny of the Asuras. Shown in the middle two pictures above, Murugan declared war on the Asura named Surapadma, and in the ensuing battle, all of the latter's sons except Iranian were slain. Unwilling to concede his defeat, Surapadma retreated to the sea.
Murugan is shown with Chitra looking vigilantly out to the sea for the return of the Asura named Surapadma, who he had once vanquished in the Hindu myth story. Is the Arumigu Subramania Swami Temple, which is dedicated to Lord Murugan and, unwittingly, a memorial to the sinking of Atlantis, since it is located at the site believed to be where the Pleiadian vanquished the Asura into the sea. Ancient temples uncovered in Guatemala and are attributed to the Maya contain written evidence of the land of Mu.
Using data gathered through an airborne laser mapping technique using LiDAR light detection and ranging, the researchers identified 478 previously unknown ancient complexes in the Mexican states of Tabasco and Veracruz. LiDAR penetrates the tree canopy and reflects three-dimensional forms of archaeological features hidden under vegetation. Additionally, they found 61,000 previously unknown structures hidden under the dense Guatemalan jungle. The potential to discover additional corroborating evidence for both Atlantis and Mu at these unadulterated sites is enormous. The word Maya originally denoted the magic power with which a god can make human beings believe in what turns out to be an illusion. It is Sanskrit meaning magic or illusion. Source Britannica. In Hindu teaching, it later came to mean the powerful force that creates the cosmic illusion that the phenomenal world is real. Maya is the empirical reality that entangles consciousness. Maya has the power to create a bondage to the empirical world, preventing the unveiling of the true unitary self, the cosmic spirit, also known as Brahman. But the original meaning of a spell-like power wielded by the gods may actually be closer to the truth, according to the contact notes.
Ninth contact, Friday, the 21st of March, 1975, 16:18 hours.
In the course of time, however, he changed his mentality, and he recognized a new might that he could exercise over the newly created human beings of Earth. Through newly appointed guardian angels and sub-leaders, he cast a spell over 3 humankinds. Through his guardian angels, Ishwish Eris let these humankinds be subjugated, and a spell be cast on them.
The Nocodemian lineage comes to planet Earth 721st contact, Friday, the 14th of June, 2019, 21:48 hours.
The beginning of the spirit form of Nocodemian on Earth came about 389,000 years ago, when a Pleiaren herald from the Nocodemian lineage named Ijum, meaning of the name, the Prudent One, came to Earth with 144,000 human beings from the Nocodemian people and settled in the Gobi Desert. However, the teaching that Ijum taught was disregarded, as has been the case since time immemorial and always, which is why there were always only a few who opened their ears to the efforts of the Annunciator. The majority of the masses, therefore, did not care for the teaching brought by the herald, but in their delusion of faith continued to follow their gods, which equally led to differences and disputes among the various faith groups, as has always been the case even in later times, and has remained so to this day among all the delusional believers in religion on Earth.
Ijum was also known by another, more familiar name, Hanuk.
589th contact, Monday, the 16th of June, 2014, 15:11 hours.
This has always been the case and will also remain so, because our interest for our stay in earthly space are solely related to your mission on this Earth, which began 389,000 years ago with Hanuk, a late successor personality of Nocodemian, on Earth, but then some 13,500 years ago, through your other predecessor personalities, Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, led to today's mission.
A clarification regarding the prophets Henoch and Enoch.
On April 30th, 2004, core group member Hans-Georg Lanzendorfer had a discussion with Billy Edward Albert Meier, to seek clarification to some questions which he and other members had about the prophet names Henoch and Enoch as they appear in OM. Hans-Georg put this information in an article which appears in FIGU, Bulletin Nunyer. 50 December 2004. OM uses 4 reference points for the Nocodemian/Henoch/Enoch lineage as it relates to the mission. Old time 12 billion to 13,500 years ago, from Nocodemian's first incarnation to the first incarnation as Enoch. Middle later time 13,500 to the 5th of February 891 BC, the first prophet Enoch, who appeared around 13,500 years ago, was followed by 2 more prophetic personalities named Enoch. The second on the 3rd of February 9308 BC, and for the last time about 4 to 5,000 years before our era, That is to say, around 11,006 to 7,000 Earth years ago. The threefold appearance is only counted once because only one Enoch carried out his mission directly for the people of Earth, while in the other two lives he carried out his mission for those who had traveled far from the depths of the universe. Other time, the 5th of February, 891 BC, Elia was the first prophet of the so-called Other Time. The last prophet of the so-called Other Time was Mohammed, whereby this time ended with the date of February 3rd, 1844, and thus the so-called Modern Era began. Modern Era, the 3rd of February, 1937, the seventh and last prophet in this series, known as the Prophet of the Modern Era, was born in Switzerland on February 3rd, 1937.
Enoch last appeared on Earth 389,000 years ago, only to appear for the first time around 13,500 years ago with the modified name Enoch, and to appear as the first prophet of the so-called later period.
For this reason, it is also said of him in OM Canon 20, verse 95.
Prophets were given to the generations of men and the nations of earth since times of old, as also were sent Enoch and Elia, Josiah and Jeremiah, and Emmanuel and Muhammad in direct succession and constant reincarnation, in addition to Johannes and Elias and Hiob and all the army of the other righteous and just, as they were Buddha, Zoroaster, and Babachi, and others also.
So when Canon 33, verse 102 states,
"And the Son of Man will be thus in torment for a long time, and will be reincarnated as prophet during many lives, and thus beginning his mission on earth as Enoch, returning but in a different time than Elijah, and then as Josiah, which he will follow as Jeremiah and Emmanuel, and also as Muhammad."
Then this has the following meaning. When Enoch founded and artificially created a new people around 8 billion years ago, the so-called Enoch lineage, by founding and artificially creating a new people, this was the beginning of his mission that continues to this day, thus beginning on earth in his mission as Enoch. 389,000 years ago. Decisive for his work in this verse is the statement,
"And thus beginning on earth in his mission as Enoch, but returning in another time as Elijah on February 5th, 891 BC.
In Canon 33, verse 102, the first prophet, Enoch, is not mentioned because he was not in the earthly, but still purely in the mission with the faraway travelers from the depths of the universe. This is not an official translation and may contain errors.
OM, Canon 31.
And the prophet of truth is with you one last time, men of earth. And he is also the same prophet, who was with you heretofore, as you can find him mentioned in the scriptures of the ancestors of your old ones, as in the epics of Uruk-Gart and in the Upanishads, but also in the signs of the Tutankhamun, in the Old Thora, and in the Qur'an, and in the Gospel, and in other scriptures.
The symbol that is written on the book OM, shown in the middle picture, was created by Nocedemian millions of years ago. It's an abbreviation of Umphalon Murado, which means navel of life or navel of the world, and embraces the essence of the creational teachings. It was first brought to earth around 389,000 years ago by Ijum, also known as Enoch, written down in Sanskrit and compiled in the Upanishads. At the beginning of the OM and the explanation section, Billy writes,
"The word concepts of the OM are contained in their original values, without any alteration or falsification, exactly as they were partially given 389,000 years ago before Christ, by the Lyrans when the first OM work was created for the people of Earth."
Furthermore, the wisdom sayings appearing in the OM should be mentioned, which were also written down 389,000 years before the present day in the original OM. Sanskrit dictionary notes. According to native authorities, Upanishad means setting to rest ignorance by revealing the knowledge of the Supreme Spirit. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer read the Latin translation and praised the Upanishads in his main work, The World as Will and Representation, 1819. He found his own philosophy was in accord with the Upanishads, which taught that the individual is a manifestation of the one basis of reality. For Schopenhauer, that fundamentally real underlying unity is what we know in ourselves as will. Schopenhauer used to keep a copy of the Latin by his side and commented, "In the whole world, there is no study so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. It has been the solace of my life, it will be the solace of my death." Schopenhauer's philosophy influenced many famous people and introduced them to the Upanishads. One of them was the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger, who once wrote,
"There is obviously only one alternative, namely the unification of minds or consciousnesses. Their multiplicity is only apparent, in truth there is only one mind. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads."
Katha Upanishad translated by Swami Paramananda.
Third, know the Atman self as the lord of the chariot, and the body as the chariot. Know also the intellect to be the driver and mind the reins. I4. The senses are called the horses, the sense objects are the roads. When the Atman is united with body, senses and mind, then the wise call him the enjoyer. V. He who is without discrimination and whose mind is always uncontrolled, his senses are unmanageable, like the vicious horses of a driver. Fury. But he who is full of discrimination and whose mind is always controlled, his senses are manageable, like the good horses of a driver. 9. The man who has a discriminative intellect for the driver and a controlled mind for the reins reaches the end of the journey, the highest place of Vishnu, the all-pervading and unchangeable one.
A driver must possess first a thorough knowledge of the road. Next, he must understand how to handle the reins and control his horses. Then will he drive safely to his destination. Similarly, in this journey of life, our mind and senses must be wholly under the control of our higher discriminative faculty. For only when all our forces work in unison can we hope to reach the goal, the abode of absolute truth.
The Atman, the higher self, is so entirely beyond human conception that it is impossible to give a direct definition of it. Only through similes can some idea of it be conveyed. That is the reason why all the great teachers of the world have so often taught in the form of parables. So here the ruler of death represents the self as the lord of this chariot of the body. The intellect or discriminative faculty is the driver who controls these wild horses of the senses by holding firmly the reins of the mind. The roads over which these horses travel are made up of all the external objects which attract or repel the senses. The sense of smelling follows the path of sweet odors. The sense of seeing follows the way of beautiful sights, etc. Thus, each sense, unless restrained by the discriminative faculty, seeks to go out towards its special objects. When the self is joined with body, mind, and senses, it is called the intelligent enjoyer, because it is the one who wills, feels, perceives, and does everything. Swami Paramananda.
The Bhagavad Gita.
The Bhagavad Gita, or Song of Life, was an oral teaching of life and spirituality and consciousness for thousands of years in the region of northern India before it was written down in Sanskrit as it is known today. Modern history does not record who actually created it or when. It is set in a narrative framework of dialogue between a prince named Arjun or Arjuna and his charioteer. Arjun must fight in a war he does not want to participate in. In the Gita, war is used as an analogy to our struggles in the material world. The epic story opens with Arjuna sitting in his chariot and pondering if he should renounce the war. He seeks the counsel of his horse driver Krishna, who is close by and whose answers and discourse constitute the storyline. Arjuna's crisis is acutely modern. The Gita's battlefield is the struggle for self-mastery that every human being must wage. Arjuna represents each of us, and Krishna walks through the issues we face daily as human beings, then addresses a path to properly navigate those obstacles. The Gita wrestles with questions about our identity, how we should live, the purpose of life, in a way that encompasses the entire spiritual and ethical struggle of humankind. The Gita is a call to action for us to meet head-on all the struggles and obligations of material existence. A hero is defined in terms of our commitment to following our purpose here on the earth, on the battlefield of life. The battle is not external, though. The battle is within a spiritual struggle against our own lower nature, the ego. The lessons of the Gita can be studied in either of two contexts. In the personified version, Krishna is creation incarnate, instructing Arjuna personally. In the non-personified view, Krishna is our inner voice trying to guide us to higher awareness. Excerpted from Chapter 7, the Bhagavad Gita.
Arjuna, once again, I cannot tell if you are in human form, instructing me face to face, or if you are my higher mind, instructing me over time, leading me to new lessons as my mind is deemed ready for them. You said before that in my case, you had come to me as an inner voice in non-personified form. Is that still how all this is occurring, for I cannot tell? It seems as if there has been a shift of some kind. I also cannot tell if this has been a single continuous conversation or one that has taken place over an extended period of time.
Krishna, what an insightful observation, Arjuna. And my answer is this: does it matter?
The Gita rejects the monastic life, for we are here to participate in the world and to help each other advance. Avoid life and we avoid the very lessons and struggles that are meant to propel us to higher and higher levels of consciousness. The teaching reaches a crescendo in the 11th chapter of the Gita. In the preceding verses, Krishna has elevated Arjuna's awareness of his purpose in life while revealing his own divinity. Now Arjuna asks to see Krishna in his real form. The sublime language of the Gita ascends to an even higher plane, producing some of the most beautiful passages ever written in Sanskrit. Arjuna sees initially the splendor of Krishna's supreme spirit as a divine light, as if 1,000 suns were to rise in the heavens at the same time. Then, within Krishna's body, Arjuna sees all the manifold forms of the universe united as 111.13. Source: the Bhagavad Gita. Translation by Eknath Iswaran. 1,000 suns rising to the heavens is a curious choice of words. Sim Yase uses a similar mental imagery in Contact Report 60 regarding Mu and the destruction of Atlantis.
A few seconds after receiving the command, on the side of the planetoid facing away from the Earth, 1,000 suns appeared to race into the dark space, and with gigantic force, the monster started moving.
OM, Canon 31.
If the wise one sees no prosperity for peace without a fight, he dieth fighting together with the enemy. For his thinking and striving for wisdom and peace is his duty, and doth not abandon him.
Adang, we are told that Ijum's presence on Earth was limited to 1/3 of a century, or roughly 33 years. We can still see evidence of Nokademian's teaching that was either the consequence of the original mission of Ijum Hanak, or subsequently from later Playaran emigrants who started the Chinese and Japanese nations.
The Chinese yin-yang symbol is intended to illustrate the universal basic principle of polarity, whereby the principle yin represents the feminine black, and yang the masculine white. Of course, the two terms have nothing to do with good or bad qualities. Diversity by Guido Moosbrugger, page 250. The spirit teaching symbol negative positive expresses negative and positive in a very clear way.
Meditation in motion is an ancient meditative exercise system created by Nocademian for the purpose of releasing physical, mental and conscious conflicts and tensions through 13 specific meditative forms of body movement. The meditation exercise consists of a slow, relaxed, flowing, gentle, and soft sequence of movements. Nocademian named the method Self-Victory Selbstsieg, which consisted of achieving victory over oneself in one's own body.
Meditation from Clear Visibility by Billy Meier, pages 295 to 301.
Hanok and Enoch taught this method of meditation to their people in ancient times, including those who were resident beyond the central sun and whose later descendants came to Earth and founded the Chinese people. Their descendants, in turn, cultivated meditation in motion on Earth and further reduced it in the sense that the simple negative and positive energies of consciousness and body and their writings were turned into a coordination of consciousness and the gathering of the mind, breathing and movement, which is the interplay of the polar cosmic forces yin and yang and harmonizing them.
This is how Nocademian's meditation teaching meditation in movement or self-victory found its way into China as so-called Taiji Quan, also called Tai Chi.
Meditation in motion is a long and never-ending journey, because meditation is learning. Learning in relation to oneself, one's own inner values, the recognition of one's own character and personality, and one's own behavior in general. But meditation is also a constant movement in creation in relation to the inner values, the virtues, knowledge, and wisdom, true love, freedom, harmony, and peace. Meditation is therefore not only a constant movement, but also a wandering in the self, and in all the factors that shape the self. Meditation in motion is also concentration on one thing that is observed, perceived, and pursued. Especially in relation to body and bodily processes, meditation makes us aware that nothing stands still, but that everything is constantly in motion and flowing. Meditation is also movement in relation to the body, and this leads the meditator to become aware of his body and psyche, but ultimately also to become aware of his or her abilities of consciousness, whereby the thoughts and feelings mature to live more consciously and meaningfully, to bring themselves into harmony, and to focus on inner freedom and inner peace. Meditation from Clear Visibility by Billy Meier, page 296.
The Sananta system and acupuncture.
The cosmic electromagnetic life energy flows in each person in certain channels that are given for this, which the Plejaren refer to as Sananta. The cosmic electromagnetic life energy arrives at the body's surface and enters into the Sananta at locations that we know of as acupuncture centers or acupuncture points. But these acupuncture nodes have nothing to do with the so-called chakras.
An illustration in the open book Chakras by Charles Ledbetter of the Theosophical Society.
Published in 1927, it is considered the first introduction of the chakras to the West. The placement of the chakras on the human body as they are shown in the illustration comes amazing close to matching their true location as provided in the creational teachings. However, Ledbetter's understanding of the purpose and function of the chakras was wrong.
The Figu book Diversity, written by Guido Moosbrugger with the assistance of Billy Meier and editing by Plejaren Yeshwish Srotpta.
Figure 1 shows the original meditation concentration points, chakras, to which the individual chakra symbols are assigned. The true chakra teaching is the Sohar immersion method, Sohar Versenkum's method, the highest form of meditation, whereby the chakras are nothing more than special concentration points that have been determined at certain locations on the body. 7 concentration points embody a certain organ and are represented by a wheel with a certain number of spokes, which indicate the value of the concentration. Figure 2 shows an example of a falsified and distorted form of chakra points with 10 minor chakras, and the number of wheel spokes are incorrect. In the middle is the spirit symbol for cosmic electromagnetic life energy, kosmische elektromagnetische Lebensenergie. To some folks, the spiral in the center may resemble a spinning wheel with its small radiating lines as spokes, hence the Sanskrit word chakra meaning wheel. Likewise, the 4 partial ellipse shapes abutting the outer circle have a resemblance to flower petals, which may be the origin of how it came to be represented as a lotus flower in ancient drawings.
But the chakra's alleged power centers located in the human body near organs and connected to each other by channels do not actually exist. The chakra doctrine is a false doctrine that makes its followers believe that these alleged power centers can be activated with suitable exercises, whereby they then become effective. As a result of successful exercises, the chakras would emit so-called vibrations, which would then enable abilities such as clairvoyance, telepathy, or teleportation, etc. Diversity, page 251.
216th contact, Monday, the 16th of March, 1987, 23:11 hours.
Acupuncture causes the healing of physical and psychological, as well as consciousness-related sufferings and illnesses through the setting of special, fine needles at specific concentration points of one's life energy, which pulse through the body on certain paths. The set needles influence the entire energetic system of the person, but this is also true for animals, fish, insects, and birds, as well as for plants, when these are treated with acupuncture. The healing effect, as I already mentioned, occurs in the body as well as in the consciousness and the psyche, depending on how and where the acupuncture needles are set. But the true origin of acupuncture doesn't trace back to traditional Chinese medicine, as is, unfortunately, erroneously maintained. Rather, it was received by the latter only from old traditions and was integrated into the old Chinese medicine and brought to application. The actual origin was already established millions of years ago, and thus traces very far back into the past, and to be sure, into Henok's time. Henok himself was the investigator and inventor of acupuncture, which was taken over and exercised by his peoples, and which has endured to the present day among the distant descendants of the peoples from beyond the sun, which is how it has been received by today's Chinese. The cosmic electromagnetic life energy, see spirit symbol above, flows in a person in certain channels that are given for this, which we, as already explained, refer to as Sananta. On the Sanantas are the acupuncture centers or acupuncture points, through which the cosmic electromagnetic life energy arrives at the body's surface, but the acupuncture nodes have nothing to do with the so-called chakras, which only correspond to an illusory form, and precisely where the acupuncture centers are, of which, overall, 786 exist. But in the Chinese acupuncture teachings, as far as I know, only 672 of these are known. The life energy penetrates at the body's surface, where it can be influenced by the acupuncture needling. The life energetic and, thus, vitally necessary Sananta system shows a certain resemblance to the circulatory system, because just as the blood pulses through the veins, so does the cosmic electromagnetic life energy pulse through the energy system. Each Sananta is also associated with a particular organ of the body, whereby all of the cycles are closely interconnected and mutually influence one another.
Thousands of years before the destruction of Mu, another Plejaren immigration party arrived to the Far East who had originally been part of Nokademian's people, and therefore had already been introduced to the spiritual teachings of life by Nokademian, which over time became compromised and diluted as happened so many times in other societies in history.
the spirit symbol for meditation. In Japan, many entrance archways to monasteries, shrines, and temples, etc., employ the very aesthetic meditation symbol to put visitors in a calm and contemplative frame of mind.
(721st contact), Friday, the 14th of June, 2019, 21:48 hours.
More than 25,000 years ago, new Playaran immigrants arrived on Earth with a slightly yellowish skin pigmentation and mixed with already existing earthly human forms, resulting in another human species that migrated to a large island.
The very ancient Satipatthana meditation teaching, aka mindfulness meditation, 355th contact, Friday, the 2nd of April, 2004, 0:17 hours.
The meditation teaching of the Satipatthana method belongs to Theravada, which according to our understanding is the teaching of the religious elders, and at the same time the name of the oldest form of Buddhism, called Pali Buddhism, whose writings are also written in Pali and Sanskrit. The actual origin of the teaching, however, lies very far back, namely with Nokademian, who in primeval times developed the Satipatthana meditation teaching as mindfulness meditation, which was brought to the earth from the depths of space by the travelers from far away and was taken up by the first Buddhism, namely by Pali Buddhism. This teaching was also recorded in writing but never translated into other languages. Only at the end of the 30s in the 20th century were first attempts made to translate the meditation teachings into other languages, with a Buddhist monk in former Ceylon known as Thirunanza, a priest of the Buddha, being the authoritative person. Unfortunately, however, the Second World War nipped everything in the bud, causing great disabilities, and consequently everything was taken up and completed only later. Being proficient in the German language, he Maha Chohan translated the 83 pages of your manuscript into English, together with other monks who also knew the German language and were partly of German descent, in less than a month. This translation, together with your German text, was then mechanically reproduced again, and in May 1948 sent to many other Buddhist elders and several ashrams, including the Buddhist monk Nyanaponika, who, like many others, drew his meditation wisdom from it, as I explained in 1994.
Nyanaponika Thera.
Was a Sri Lankan formerly known as Ceylon Theravada Buddhist monk and scholar. He was born in Germany as Sigmund Fenninger in 1901. When World War II broke out in 1939, the British government had all German males resident in their colonies, including Ceylon, consigned to concentration camps, suspecting them to be German spies. Nyanaponika was interned first in Ceylon and later in northern India. Despite these experiences as a prisoner of war, he compiled an anthology of texts on Satipatthana meditation. Satipatthana is translated from Pali as Foundations of Mindfulness. Years later, after the war had ended, Nyanaponika released his book, The Heart of Buddhist Meditation, a handbook of mental training based on the Buddha's way of mindfulness. On the far right is the spiritual symbol for discipline, which lies at the core of developing mindful consciousness.
The individual authors always claim to be the authors of the writings or books themselves, and even claim that they were also the translators of the original writings from Pali and Sanskrit, although Svath and Asket truthfully did this work.
And what about the person who wrote the book you mentioned? Where did this person get the knowledge of the meditation teachings I wrote?
You mean the Buddhist monk Nyanaponika? He got his meditation wisdom from your scriptures as well as from various others. The translations of Svath and Asket were also made available to him and various others.
Ancient foot massaging.
There is a chapter in Billy Meier's book, The Psyche, called Massaging the Soles of the Feet, Physical Well-Being. He writes that the massage of the reflex zones located at the soles of the feet should be regularly practiced. For those who want to acquire a right mode of life that's in tune with the basic laws of nature. The nerve reflex zones of the entire body are concentrated specifically in the soles of the feet, and Billy adds that the ancient Chinese and other ancient peoples were familiar with the practice.
A Buddhapada carved into a stone slab. Meaning Buddha's footprints in Sanskrit, they were originally attributed to be where Buddha once stood or walked within the framework of Buddhist religion. Are two spirit lesson symbols, life in the light, Leben im Licht, on top and origin of the being becoming and all existence, Ursprung der Seinwerdung und aller Existenz, on the bottom. Many so-called Buddhapada have spirit symbols located at key positions on the sole of the foot, so as to massage and stimulate the body for health-generating benefits, similar to a reflexology board found today when one stands or moves their feet on it.
Although the Buddha's traditional life story does not mention travel outside of northeastern India, the cult of Buddha's footprints is so strong that Tibet, Sri Lanka, and Burma, as well as Thailand, claim to have footprints that were actually made by the Buddha. Many of these Buddhapada mark important pilgrimage sites today. The fact that most are enormous in size does not alter the fact one iota that they are unquestionably accepted by worshippers as footprints made by Buddha. It is reasonable to speculate that they have nothing to do with Buddha, but predate him to a much earlier time when the creational teachings were brought to earth.
OM, Canon 24.
And the Ishwish speaketh, and again is said that the scripture of the word of truth was given for the fulfillment to the old prophets, who were in preceding order, Mohammed, Emmanuel and Buddha, and they acted according to the scripture, to do good and for the clarification of all things, and that a direction and guidance of creation for the human beings of earth is given. Billy traveled back in time with Svath to visit and speak with Buddha as well as Emmanuel and Muhammad.
754th contact, Tuesday, the 13th of October, 2020, 22:31 hours.
It is also written in the annals that you and my father together in times past visited and spoke with those heralds several times, and were able to gain knowledge that is unknown to me.
Siddhartha Gautama was completely shocked when he learned what would result from his original teaching in the future of the 20th century, but after he had learned the truth and also the day of his death, he decided during the last 17 years of his life to stand up for his teaching even more and even more vehemently, in order to possibly be able to prevent something even more detrimental. And as it is with the human beings of the earth, so it was also with Siddhartha, for he did not want to accept what was coming, and held on to his opinion that he could still change some, or even everything for the good and positive through his increased and more powerful commitment to spreading his teaching. This, although he said frankly, after he had experienced the facts of the future that he himself had experienced in his life and knew that already during his lifetime, falsifications of his teaching had circulated, and faith groups had arisen that spread his true teaching in a completely false, changed form and even teaching evil. Consequently, the absolutely true original teaching, from which Buddhism arose, is in its effective origin, just as Siddhartha created and taught it, not a matter of faith or belief, but a teaching of the correct way of life, teaching of self-knowledge, teaching of experience and teaching of self-development, with the aim of mental evolution and the use of understanding, reason and correct mastery of life in every respect. Siddhartha Gautama was born in Nepal in Lumbini in 563 BC as a Hindu died at the age of 80 years anno 483 BC at Kushinagar in India.
Robots guarded Buddha's relics.
In India, robots or mechanical beings that could move on their own were called Putavahana Yanta, or spirit movement machines in Pali and Sanskrit. Buddhist legends of northeastern India from the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE describe an army of automata that guarded Buddha's relics. In one version, which features both killer robot assassins and robot guardians, a young man travels in disguise to the land of the Yavanas Greek speakers to learn the art of robot making, a secret closely guarded by the Yantakara's automaton makers, their knowledge that he then steals to make the artificial guards. We find stories of automatic warriors guarding the Buddha's relics in Chinese, Sanskrit, Hindu, and Tibetan texts. According to Buddhist texts, after Buddha's death, his cremated remains were divided and distributed among 8 princes. Each of the princes constructed a stupa Buddhist shrine at or near his capital city, within which the respective portion of the ashes was enshrined. Some 300 years later, Emperor Ashoka opened 7 of these stupas and removed the Buddha relics. His goal was to redistribute the relics into 84,000 stupas, which he planned to construct throughout his empire. According to legend, the Serpent King was guarding the Ramagrama stupa and prevented Ashoka from unearthing the relic. A good bet might be that was where Siddhartha was really buried with his bones intact and that the others were decoys. In the picture on the right is the design plan for the future development of Ramagrama Stupa, believed to contain the Buddha's remains. Additionally, mechanical automata also appear elsewhere in the Chinese historical record. For example, at the court of Tang ruler Empress Wuzhou C. 624-705 CE. In an Old French version of the Aeneid C. 1160 CE, a golden robot archer stands sentry over the tomb of a fallen warrior queen, and in the history of Alexander the Great C. 1180 CE, the ruler encounters golden killer robots guarding a bridge in India and armed copper robots protecting the tomb of the Emir of Babylon. In the Old French Roman de Troyes, the history of Troy, we find 6 golden automata, including 4 androids that patrol and surveil the entire Trojan court for any lapses in dress, manner, speech, and even thought, while also providing entertainment. Courtiers could relax, knowing they would not inadvertently commit a faux pas, nor would anyone else, and the rulers could relax, knowing that none of their courtiers were spreading misinformation or plotting against them. In one Buddhist tale that appears in multiple versions, an automaton maker creates an artificial serving girl who fools a visiting artist into thinking it is human. So he has violent intercourse with it, destroying it in the process. In Sanskrit texts from the 10th and 11th centuries CE, there are descriptions of the automata in the courts of northwestern India, such as female attendants that would beguile certain guests.
Source: robots guarded Buddha's relics in A Legend of Ancient India by Adrian Meier.
Buddhist stupas typically consisted of simple earthen mounds. In fact, stupa is a Sanskrit word for heap. However, there are certain Tibetan Buddhist stupas that are distinctive in appearance and construction. On the left is a photograph taken in 1920s Tibet, now part of China, of a Buddhist stupa. On the right is the patent diagram labeled an apparatus for transmitting electrical energy, obtained by Nikola Tesla patent #1, 119,732 in 1914. However, this stupa design predates Nicola's patent application by many centuries.
This row of stupas appears to be aligned in an array. The same stupa design can be seen dotting the countryside in remote areas. An egg-shaped energy field is depicted as emanating from this stupa on an old Tibetan tapestry. Although it is generally considered to be a sepulchral monument, a place of burial, or a receptacle for Buddhist religious objects, the architecture actually predates Buddhism itself.
In this excerpt from a Tibetan text, Guide to Proportions by Toku Sangye Lawang, the wording of this passage admonishes and warns against any deviation from its design, suggesting a much different purpose.
Otherwise, what is fashioned according to your own preference will not inspire faith, but waste resources. Having therefore cast aside such innovative, unconventional styles, the intelligent should take note of proper proportions.
Coming up next, Ancient Earth History Part 8 Atlantis in Mu Chapter 30.